So guys, we have spoken about this before, but let's just summarize it nicely. The Cartesian plane is where you have your x and your y axes, and the two, they intersect, they meet each other, they cut each other. So I'm just going to draw, don't worry about how long this line is now or the scale or anything. We're just drawing a small Cartesian plane over here. Important is that you always put arrows on the ends of your axes. And guys, the arrows, just like when we're drawing a number line, right? We know that numbers go on and on and on and on and on to infinity. And on the negative side, they go on and on and on and on and on to negative infinity. We're not going to list every single number that exists on this axis, right? We're just going to draw it for the points that we need, like we saw on Friday. But we are putting those arrows there just to show that we know that we say our number line or our x-axis here stops at 5. There are other numbers past 5, right? We can have 6 and 7 and 100 and 1000 and so on. So that is just what the arrow is showing. It's showing that we can actually have more numbers from what are on there. All right, we always put a y at the top to show that that is the y-axis. We put an x next to our flat axis to show that that is the x-axis. And also we put a big 0 around that point just to show that that is the point 0, 0. Okay, there where the two axes meet. Now this block, this section of the Cartesian plane is the first quadrant, quadrant 1. And any point that we have in this quadrant, if we had to list the coordinates, so the x value and the y value, all of these numbers on this side of the x-axis will be positive numbers. All right, so any x value will be positive in this quadrant. And any y value, what are all these values on this side of the y-axis? They are also all positive. So any y value here will also be positive. In the first quadrant, your x values are all positive and your y values will be positive. Then from quadrant 1, we go anti-clockwise with the others. So the one next to it is quadrant 2. Now for quadrant 2, what x values do we have here? Positive x values or negative x values? Negative. Okay, so the x value is always going to be negative there. But which y values am I going to have? What are these y values up here? Positive. So any point in the second quadrant, in quadrant 2, in that section of the Cartesian plane, will have a negative x value and a positive y value. The next one is then quadrant 3. Now, which x values do we have in quadrant 3? What numbers will I have here? Negative numbers, right? There's 0 in the middle. On that side, we have positive values. On the other side, we have negative values. Okay, it's like a number line, exactly like a number line. So all x values here will be negative. Now, what about these y values? This is also a number line, right? There we have 0. Above 0, we have positive values, and below 0, we have negative values. So any y value in the third quadrant will also be negative. Okay, then the last one is quadrant 4. And in the fourth quadrant, we will have positive x values, right? It's on the positive side of the x-axis. Positive x values, but still negative y values. All right, do we see that? It's underneath 0, it's below 0. So these are all going to be negative values. Okay, any questions on that, guys? All right, I'm just going to write here when writing the coordinates of a point slash ordered pair we have to write it in this form. Okay, like that. So you always have a bracket, then you write the x value or the x coordinate. You use a semicolon, we write the y value or the y coordinate, and then we close that bracket. Guys, if you leave your brackets out, for example, you're going to lose marks. Okay, if you swap the order of x and y around, you're going to lose marks. It's very important that you always write it in that form. Maybe highlight that x, y. Okay, I can't highlight it now because it's going to smudge. But highlight this or draw a box around it, underline it, make stars around it. It's very, very important. All the way to matric, guys, you are going to have to write points in this form. Okay, now we've done point plotting. We did it when we played battleships. We've done it in that exercise. Some of you have done that exercise, some not. All right, we will mark that tomorrow. I just want to show you quickly what we're going to do next. Okay, so this it's just here on my phone, but this was, I posted this on the class Google Classroom as a screenshot as well, right? But this is from the functions note, which is on Google Classroom on the grade one. So it starts there. We've basically, oh, this is something that I wanted to add in here. Just make a little arrow pointing to that point there in the middle. That point has a specific name. It is called the origin. Okay, so whenever they're talking about the origin, they use that word quite often. They are referring to that point, the point where the two axes meet. And if they're asking for the coordinates of the origin, it's very easy. It's always 0, 0. Okay, it's 0 on the x-axis, on the flat number line, and it is 0 on the y-axis, on the long number line. Okay, 0, 0, that is the origin. You have to know that word, please, guys. If they're using that word, you need to understand what point they're referring to. Okay, then you can see in the note here, they also have that the Cartesian plane is split up into 4 quadrants. We've just summarized that over here. And then we have ordered pairs and that exercise that you guys must do. Okay, we'll mark that tomorrow. So if you haven't done it yet, you are going to have to do it, not tomorrow, sorry, on Wednesday. So I'm writing here, exercise 1. I know that I think we all drew the axes together in class on Friday, all right, but you're going to have to fill in those points. Then after that, we are now going to talk about types of lines, because that's actually what we are doing this year, guys. We're going to be talking about all different types of straight lines. All right, so types of lines. And we're going to just talk about the first 2 types today. So the first one is vertical lines. Okay, now I'm just going to write a few things down here that we need to know. Vertical lines have an equation. So I'm going to write equation of x equals a. And a is going to be a number. Okay, you'll see now when we're drawing some of these graphs. So a vertical line can have the equation x equals 1, or x equals 4, or x equals -6. Right, that is what a vertical line equation will look like. And basically, guys, the equation of a line is telling you how it's going to look on the Cartesian plane. Okay, so we're going to draw an example now. I want you to do another little Cartesian plane here. Your scale doesn't matter, guys. Don't get caught up in that. I actually made this one a little long. But please remember, every time you draw your Cartesian plane, you have to draw it properly. So not just two lines, you need your two lines. You need to put arrows on all four ends. You're going to label the vertical one as Y and the horizontal one as X. You're going to label the origin 0, 0. Every single time you draw a Cartesian plane, you have to do all of those things. Okay, now I want you to take your ruler, guys, and just anywhere here on the positive side of the x-axis, we're going to draw a line that is parallel to the y-axis. So it has to just be, it can't be a skew one. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so we're not going to draw a line like this or like this. We're going to draw a line that has the same, it's parallel to our y-axis. Okay, so maybe use your ruler just to kind of make it the same so that it looks parallel, and we can draw it a little bit shorter than the axis. Okay, so we're going to draw a line in like that. And again, we're going to put arrows on both ends. I want you to make some points on that line. Okay, now obviously that will depend on how long you made yours. Okay, so for my one, I'm going to just have points on the lines of my book, basically. If you have blocks, then maybe you'll have more points. It doesn't matter. Now guys, let's say that this is at x equals 1. Is that fine with you? All right, we're just saying that it is. This point is going to be the point. If 1 is the x value, what is the y value of this point? 0. So see if you can find the point 1, 0. It's the point that lies on the x-axis. Right? So just the point where your line crosses the x-axis. Okay, just label that point as 1, 0. Write it next to that point, please. Then you go to one line up or one block up. It depends on the type of book that you have. This point, guys, do we agree that this point here has the same x value as the point below it? Right? What would the x value of this point be? Won't it be the same as that one? Right? They're directly above each other. Okay, so this point is going to have the same x value. We'll call it 1. But if it's on your first line or your first block, we're going to say, what is the y value of it? Also 1. Okay, now obviously this isn't drawn to scale, so don't worry if it's not exactly 1 centimeter. Okay, we're not fussed about that. The point above it, if you have a point above that one, what is the x value of this point going to be? If the x value of the 2 points directly below it is 1, what is this x value going to be? 1 again, hey? And then if it's on the second line or the second block or whatever, what is the y value going to be? 2. If you have another point above it, that will be the point 1, 3. If you have another point above that one, it will be the point 1, 4. And let's look at this point down here. What do we think? What would the x value of this point be? If the 3 points, all 4 or 5, depending on your one, all have the same x value of 1, what is this x value going to be? Also 1, hey? And what about the y value now? If it's on the first line below 0 or the first block below 0, what is this y value going to be? -1, good. If you have another point underneath that one, you would label it as 1, -2. Okay? Now, guys, what I want you to notice is that all of these points, and if our line was long, all of the points above this last one that I have, and all of the points below the last one that I have, they will all have an x value of 1. Does that make sense? Because it's a line that just goes straight all the way down, all the way up. All right, so every single point on this line, every point on this line will have the same x value, an x value of 1. Let's write that. Every point on this line has an x value of 1. And guys, because of that, the equation of this line, so let's say therefore equation is going to be x equals 1. So to find the equation of a vertical line, we only need one point on that line. The x value of that point gives us the equation of the line. Okay, so we can do another one here on the side, on the negative side of the x-axis. Let's do one over there as well. Let's draw it a bit further away from the x-axis as the previous one. Right, so I'm going to use a different color. You can use the same color, it doesn't really matter. But again, we're drawing a vertical line, right? So it has to just be a straight line going straight up. Okay, it's not skew at all. And now I'm just going to show one point on this line. All right, I'm going to say that that is the point, -2 and 0. They can give you any point on that line. Okay, they could give you a point above the axis. They could give you a point below the axis. Doesn't matter. The one that I've now chosen to give you guys is -2, 0. Now, guys, what you need to ask yourself is they're now asking you to find the equation of this line. All right, you need to say, okay, it's a vertical line. So the equation is going to be x equals a number. If it's vertical, it's always x. X equals a number. What number do I have on this line? What x value have they given me on this line? -2. So this equation is x equals -2. And that's it. That's all you need to find the equation of that line. You just need 1 point anywhere on that line. Whatever the x value of that point is, that is the equation of the line. You can't just say -2. Okay, you have to say x equals -2. All right, that's very important. We're going to do horizontal lines now so that you can see the difference between the two. Then it might make a bit more sense. Okay. Do you have any questions on this now? Guys, if they give you an equation and they ask you to draw it, so say I'm asking you to draw the line x equals 1. X, then you need to think x equals, that's a vertical line, and 1, it means that it has to be where x is equal to 1. Okay, we can do that now. That's going to come up in the next exercise. Okay, let's move on to horizontal lines. Are you all done copying this down? Okay, number 2 is going to be horizontal lines. And then maybe when you see the difference between the two types, it will make more sense. So horizontal lines is the second type. Now the equation of a horizontal line will be y equals b. And b is going to be a number. So we're doing the same thing. We're just going to draw a Cartesian plane. Make sure that you do your arrows and you do your origin and you do your y and your x. Now let's draw it on our first line or our first block. It depends on the type of book you have. We're going to draw a line in like that. You can just make it a bit shorter than your axis. All right, I'm doing it in a different color as well. Now I want you just to, we're not going to plot a whole bunch of points. We'll just plot that one that's on the y-axis. Okay, so where your line, your horizontal line, cuts the y-axis there. So on that point, that is now going to be the point. Remember, when we write points down, we need to put the x value first and then the y value. What is the x value of this point, guys? If we look, it's in line with 0. Okay, so the x value of this point is 0. Good. And the y value, because it's on the first line or the first block, we'll say that it has a y value of 1. Now, guys, do we agree that every point next to this one will also have a y value of 1? Right? If I choose a point there and there, they are all in line with 1 on the y-axis. Do we see that? Right? It could have any x value here. This could be -1, -2, it doesn't really matter. But the y value will be 1. Right? Do you see that? What about any points here? If this is +1 on the x-axis, it's still in line with 1 on the y-axis. Right? So for this one, any point on this line will have a y value of 1. And because of that, the equation is, what do you guys guess? Y equals 1. Well done. Let's draw in y equals -2. Y equals -2. So you're going to go to your y-axis. You're going to go to -2. And you're going to draw a horizontal line from there. So on your y-axis, whether you have lines or blocks, just go to the second one on the negative side. So from 0, 2 rows down, or 2 lines down, or 2 blocks down. We're going to -2. There where you have that point on the y-axis. Let's label that point. The x value is 0, and the y value now, because it's 2 down, is -2. This line has an equation of y equals -2. Every point on that line, guys, will have the same y value, right? Every single point here is in line with -2. Every single point here is in line with -2. So every single point will have a y value of -2. That is why the equation is y equals -2. Okay, so let's write a little thing down here to find the equation of a horizontal line. We only need one point on that line. The y value of that point gives us the equation of the line. Okay, so guys, what did we say now? We've done 2 lines, right? I'm going to write something extra just now. But for a vertical line, one that looks like this, the equation is always x equals an x value on that line. Okay, for a horizontal line, the equation is always y equals a y value on that line. Now, what do we notice? Both of these lines here, right? These are 2 horizontal lines, both with an equation of y equals a number. Do we notice that they only cut the y-axis, right? Does this line go through the x-axis? Right, if it's a straight line, it's going to be straight forever and ever, all right? It will never cut the x-axis. This line, a horizontal line, only cuts the y-axis. Right, so that's a way of remembering that the equation has to be y equals something. because it will only cut the y-axis. Let's add that. So horizontal line only cuts the y-axis. Right, it will only go through the y-axis. When I say cut, I mean goes through the y-axis. Okay, so that you can remember that if you're looking at the picture, if they've given you a picture like this, they're asking for the equations. You can see, okay, this line only goes through the y-axis. So the equation is going to be y equals a y value on this line. Okay, so the horizontal lines are all about y. They only cut the y-axis. So the equation is y equals, and the number that you choose is the y value of that point. Okay, so horizontal lines are all about y. If we go back to vertical lines quickly, because I need to add that there as well, do we notice that both of these vertical lines only cut the x-axis? They only go through the x-axis. Remember the x-axis is this one, right? The flat axis. This line, x equals -2, cuts the x-axis. It goes through the x-axis. Do we see that? This one also goes through the x-axis. So if it goes through the x-axis, the equation is x equals an x value on that line. Okay, so a vertical line only cuts the x-axis. You guys have any questions on that? Yes. All right, guys, we're going to do exercise 2 now. I'm going to help you get started. And exercise 2 is all about these two types of lines. So please write down exercise 2. I just need to check quickly. How are we going to draw this? Yeah, that seems fine. Okay, exercise 2. This is also from the notes on Google Classroom. I will put it on the board just now when we're done doing the first few together. So for exercise 2, they say draw a Cartesian plane on your book, remembering to keep the scale, or in your book, sorry, remembering to keep the scale constant. Draw and label the following graphs. Okay, so in exercise 1, we had to plot points. Now we're actually going to draw in lines. Okay, so guys, we're going to draw a Cartesian plane together. I'm just checking quickly. We need to go from, I wonder if we're going to fit this in now. Just looking at our y values. So the y values are supposed to go to from -5 to 6. I don't have enough space here. I think I'm just going to give you guys a list of equations that you must draw myself. All right, we're not going to go with the ones in the book. So let's just go from -5 to 5. Do you guys have 10 lines open? Just check. 3, 4, 5. Okay, so do 10 lines like that. So I've done 5, and then I've drawn my little notch there. That's where I'm going to put my x-axis, and then 5 down. I will just handwrite a list of graphs that you must draw in there. Okay, so don't worry about the ones that they've listed on Google Classroom. Then for our x-axis, let's use the same. Let's go a bit further. Let's do 7 and 7. All right, so we're going 14 centimeters. Obviously, if you have blocks, you're just going to use the blocks. Okay, so we're going 14. So 0 to 7, and then 7 to 14. So make sure that the 7 is on this y-axis over here. Okay, so that you go 7 centimeters to the left, and then 7 centimeters to the right. Guys, please, if you don't have blocks in your book, use your ruler to make a notch at every centimeter like this. Okay. Then you don't have to go measure every time. And just do it like that. Just draw a little notch. I'm just going to lengthen my x-axis a little bit on each side so that I can draw my arrow in. Okay, so just slightly like that. And then we're going to add our arrows. Okay, so do you see what I've done? I've gone from 0 to 7 and then 7 to 14, and then I'm just lengthening it on each side a little bit so that I have space for my arrows. Once you've done that, make sure that you're labeling everything correctly, right? We need our Y. Next to that arrow on the Y-axis, we need the X. Next to that arrow on the X-axis, and we need to put our 0 to label the origin. Okay, I'm going to list them all here. And I'm going to do the first 3 with you, and then you're going to do the next ones on your own. Okay, we're just going to J, which is, let me just check. Okay, guys, let's do A, B, and C together quickly. So now we have the Cartesian plane. We're giving, or they are giving you the equation, and you have to draw it in. Okay, so for the first one, for A, you need to see it's x equals 3. That means that it's going to cut the x-axis, all right, at 3. Did everyone hear what I said now? It's going to cut the x-axis. So this one is the x-axis, right? At 3. So we're going to go to 3 on the x-axis, guys. That's 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's going to have to go through that point. And if it's just x equals 3, we know that it is a vertical line. So it's going to look like this. You're going to take your ruler. You're going to put it there where x equals 3 at that notch. And you're just going to draw a straight line going up and down from that x value. And that is your line. I'm going to say again, they say x equals 3. So you go to the x-axis, 3. You put your line down. You just need to know that it is a vertical line. All right? Because, guys, if this is a horizontal line, isn't it just going to be this? If I try to draw a horizontal line from x equals 3, I'm going to get that. Okay? And then it's also cutting the y-axis, which is wrong. An x line must only cut the x-axis. Okay? Now, all you need to show, please, is one point. So let's do the one that's on the axis there. Yeah. You can decide. You just keep your ruler there and you just draw the line. But yeah, it has to go through your axis like that. It has to be in both of these quadrants. Yes. Now, guys, what are the coordinates of this point? What is the x value of this point? 1, 2, 3. Hey, so 3. And what is the y value of this point? It's in line with 0. So 3, 0. We're going to talk a lot more later on about points that you have to label on lines and so on. It is going to get a bit more complicated. For now, we're only putting that one that's on the axis, and we write the coordinates down. Guys, I also need you to label this line. Okay, so at the top, or you could choose to do it at the bottom. It doesn't matter as long as it's next or by one of those arrows. You're going to have to actually write down the equation of the line like that. Okay, so that is what they've given you. X equals 3. You write it either at the top or you can write it at the bottom as well. That's also fine. Okay, that's fine for the first one. Second one, y equals 3. That means that it must cut the y-axis at 3. So you go to your y-axis. There's 0. We go to 1, 2, 3. You can plot that point immediately. Right, so I'm going to say again, y equals 3. It has to cut the y-axis, which is this one, at 3. So you go to 3 on the y-axis. You plot that point, then you take your ruler and you're just going to draw that line in. Now I'm just going to make it a little bit shorter than my axis like that. Okay, and you put your arrows on the side. Now that point that we plotted, we have to write the coordinates of that point, okay? So just next to it or just underneath, you can write it anywhere around this point as long as it's quite close to the point. What is the x value of this point, guys? It's across from or in line with which value on the x-axis? 0, good. So the x value there is 0. And what is the y value? 3. One last thing that we have to put in is y equals 3. Again, you can write it on either side. You can write it next to the first arrow, next to the last one. It doesn't matter as long as it's somewhere next to it. So guys, are we seeing the difference between x equals 3 and y equals 3? All right, x is a vertical line. It cuts the x-axis at 3. Y equals 3 is a horizontal line. It cuts the y-axis at 3. Okay. I'm going to do this third one with you just quickly. X equals 2. X, it's going to cut the x-axis. So let's go to our x-axis, the flat one, and we're going to 2 on the x-axis. Because it's saying x must equal 2. All right, so x equals 2. We plot that point. We take our ruler and we draw a straight line, a vertical line now, going through that point. Okay, now I'm just going to label this point just on the side because if I write it there, you might be confused with which one is which. Okay, we need to label this point. What is the x value of this point? 2. And the y value of this point is 0. It's in line with 0 on the y-axis. Okay, so 2, 0. And we must also write the equation of this line. That's what they gave us. Okay, x equals 2. Now, guys, if you feel like it's a bit cramped up here, this is now where you can write it underneath the line. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it's at the top or the bottom, as long as it's there. Okay, guys, remember, x lines are vertical. Y lines are horizontal. Okay, you're going to do the rest of these on your own now, please. So you're going to plot D to J, those lines. Make sure that on each line you label the point on the axis and you also write the equation of the line next to it or underneath or below or above it. Okay, keep going, see if you can do those.